Learn from top professors on the road or in your home with Learn 25. Myrna Sheldon is an expert on the history and science of sexuality and gender. The 2020 recipient of the History of Science Society's Margaret W. Rossiter History of Women in Science Award, she holds a doctorate in the history of science from Harvard University. Professor Sheldon was a postdoctoral fellow in the Center for the Study of Women, Gender, and Sexuality at Rice University, and has also held fellowships at Harvard Divinity School and in the Darwin Correspondence Project at Cambridge University. Her writing explores how both evolutionary science and Christianity influence racial and sexual identities in the United States. Topic 1. Enlightenment Environment.
In 1614, the English sailor and surgeon William Davis was captured by pirates off the coast of what is now Algeria. He later wrote about his experiences in a book called A True Relation of the Travels of Most Miserable Captivity of William Davis. The book was printed in 1614, but then it circulated widely in subsequent reprintings, and it finally made its way to North America in 1789. Now, Davis's tale was full of salacious descriptions of his experiences being captured by pirates, and of his travels through what were called the Barbary states that the pirates came from. And his story is an example of what was a common and pretty popular genre of what we now call Barbary captivity tales. They were something that lots of Englishmen wrote in the 16th and 17th centuries. The Barbary states were a set of regencies that were held by the Ottoman Empire, which was itself centered in what we now know as Turkey. And so as an Englishman, Davis referred to all the people who lived there, including the pirates who captured him, as Turks, a description that he meant to both be an ethnicity and also a religion, i.e. Islam, that his readers would have recognized. Now, Davis's story, like so many of its kind, claimed that the Turks were sodomites, and furthermore that the Christian Englishmen that they captured were forcibly sodomized by those pirates. The Barbary pirates overall were just an enormous political and economic problem for European states and their colonies up through the early 19th century. They were a very strong principality, and they challenged Europeans for the control of the Mediterranean Sea, and were overall just a huge threat to Atlantic colonialism and trading. And it's here, with pirates, that we're actually going to start our journey through the history of science and sexuality for the United States. So before we continue with the pirates, let's pause a moment to introduce what this lecture series is about, and also figure out why we're starting here in the 17th century. So in this lecture series, we will explore how science has shaped our present-day experiences of sexuality. We're going to focus especially on the role of science and medicine and how they shape how we understand sexual identity and desire, as well as conception, pregnancy, and childbirth. Now, human societies have studied sex for as long as we have written records, and probably even before that if Paleolithic art has anything to tell us. And importantly, there are still lots of ways that ancient civilizations continue to influence how we think of and experience sexuality, especially when we think about how ancient sacred texts like the Christian Bible or the Hindu Upanishads are still actively read and utilized today. And also systematic knowledge of the body from ancient times, from the Greeks, ancient cultures in China, the native peoples of the Americas, they still are things that we draw on and we use for our present-day view of sexuality. But since we're interested in understanding science and sexuality, we're going to start in the 17th century, because this is an important inflection in history, both for science and also for sexuality, for a few important reasons. The first is simply that because of the rise of European colonialism and the dominance of the Atlantic slave trade in world economies, men in Europe sought ways to make sense of the peoples, cultures, and bodies they encountered. And because of this, we'll start to see that especially for English-speaking or Anglophone cultures of Europe and North America, there was a move away from strictly Christian understandings of sexuality to new ways of thinking and talking about sex that involve natural and medical knowledge. So in this lecture series, we'll be moving historically from the 17th century to the present to see how scientific and medical knowledge about sexuality emerged,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?